Let's talk about JonBenet Ramsey, and not her specifically, not the little girl that was found brutally murdered in her own home on Christmas night 1996 in Boulder, Colorado. Let's talk about what's happening now with the build-up to CrimeCon, because some little pennies slowly dropped in this, dense little brain of mine. I heard of the Prosecutors podcast because they started covering JonBenet's case. I'd never heard of them before, but they'd been in existence for a little while, and I thought, well, this might be interesting because... Sorry, I switched something off on my phone. I thought this might be interesting because wouldn't it be great for legal professionals to explain some of the case that, we mere mortals, mere plebs may not understand, specifically to do maybe with the grand jury process, right? And Alex Hunter wielding his autonomy and power by not proceeding with indicting the Ramseys. So I thought I'd give it a listen. It's a podcast. Brett and Alice is who they present themselves as, and apparently for a very long time you didn't know anything more than Brett and Alice. Brett being a very southern gentleman, using that good southern charm. He's a young man, sounds older, good voice for radio, good voice for a podcast. His name's Brett Talley, and he's sort of mid-30s to 40, and the woman is Alice LaCour. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Lacour. Cour? I don't know. They don't say it. It's Brett and Alice. Brett and Alice have a 9-part podcast that they've uploaded to YouTube, and it's filled with a lot of fluff. It's very frustrating, but at first you're giving it a go, right? And they've got sponsors, and you think, well, look, fair enough, because they've got to make some money out of this endeavor. It comes to the point where you think, well, are they not working as prosecutors? They're not earning a buck in their profession that they trained many years for, because there is half the podcast of tortuous, reading out of their sponsors' ads and just general waffle. Now, I know I waffle, but I do try to get straight to the point and keep on subject. So that's very annoying and worrisome. And as it's going along, you realise, not too far into the series, that certain people, namely the Ramseys, are getting a very easy ride. Not only is the constant sponsorship and the waffle, the slow talking, not only does this drive you up the wall, but the very content, the very meaning behind the podcast, which is to exonerate Ramsey, becomes very apparent. So you wonder, who the fuck are Alice and Brett? So Brett Talley, he is the only person to have never tried a case, never prosecuted a case to be put up to become a judge by President Trump, nominated to become judge by him or recommended. This caused quite the uproar. Alice stopped prosecuting after just a few cases because one of hers in 2019 allegedly, the judge in that case said, you're just patently deficient. So maybe the prosecutors in the Morphew case could leave their professions and start a podcast. So then we hear, who's appearing at CrimeCon? Ramsey. JonBenet Ramsey. And who's using the Bird app to promote a podcast, to sing the praises of Brett and Alice, the disgraced prosecutors, the underwhelming prosecutors? John Andrew Ramsey. He's kind of balls deep up Brett and Alice. You have to think, what sort of sponsorship has Brett and Alice received from the Ramseys? Because they're basically working for them. One commenter on a more recent episode of their podcast, The Prosecutors, in the series about JonBenet Ramsey's horrendous murder, you know, the little girl found tortured and dead in her very own home, in a very private room of a basement of a sprawling mansion. He commented, next Brett and Alice will have JonBenet committing suicide. This is how disgusting their podcast is. It's not factual in a lot of places. It is one of those scripted things where they are telling you what to think and hoping you just don't notice that it is a huge leap in logic or assumption, etc. In the words of the judge toward Alice, I mean, it is patently deficient as any sort of work of journalism. I mean, it has zero merit in that regard. It will tell the believer what they want to hear, and the new viewer, it will lead them down a merry path. And what it's also doing is ensuring that there is something current for people to find who might be going to CrimeCon, for people to find about JonBenet Ramsey, JonBenet's father, her only surviving parent, so that he's received as a victim at CrimeCon and not a person of interest at CrimeCon. John Ramsey is going to CrimeCon to make an appearance as a victim of crime. He's definitely a person who has had suffering and stress for decades of his life. He had already lost his eldest daughter, Beth, in a car accident. Her boyfriend or fiance at the time also lost his life in this car accident. And this was his eldest child, I believe, as well. And Ramsey never, ever, ever got over it. And, you know, well, you don't. We learn this. If you haven't experienced it yourself, you certainly know that people who lose a child, it is the greatest suffering someone can have here on earth. So Ramsey has gone through this with Beth, who was just reaching that blossoming adulthood of around 20, 21 years of age, beginning a life with a partner and a very exciting time for her like that. Then JonBenet, the apple of her mother's eye, and Daddy's little girl, as the mother explains to press during interviews, she dies at a very tender age and in such a horrible way, and the investigation just leaves so many questions, and people do naturally wonder about the circumstances, and even forgetting the ransom note, which is 3 pages long. They, I believe, Patsy and John Bennett, would still be under suspicion from law enforcement and members of the public and other types of investigators, etc., journalists, to this very day. But there's been so much maneuvering on the side of the Ramseys and networks and, this intruder theory put forth by John Smith. It's so discredited, it's so ludicrous, and yet now the groundswell now moves on to it's the changing of the guard. His granddaughter and maybe her mother, his daughter, are carrying on his work of laboring a stupid theory so well, presenting it so well, so in such a believable fashion, because of course they're not, because of the bias that, a whole new generation of people discovering the case, or a generation of people prior that may have always had doubts or wondered or always been interested or heard about it but not really knew much until now. This whole new groundswell of people now are in on this side of the intruder theory again, right? And it just keeps going around. What the prosecutors are doing is pure propaganda. It's propaganda. And if you forensically examined their show, their personal finances, what would you find? Because John himself likes to say he's on the verge of, he's not very rich and everything, but, he's got his son Burke out to work for him. I mean, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. They didn't just go to Burke. Of course, there are monies in the coffer available to John Ramsey. I think he's making this last-ditched effort to die a exonerated man, a grieving father. I don't deny that he's a grieving father. Hey, murder or abuse, etc., or neglect is part of the charges that the grand jury in Boulder, Colorado, chose to indict the Ramseys on in 1999. We didn't learn about it until 2013. It doesn't exclude then feeling grief, missing somebody, having maybe some remorse or regret, particularly if it's meant that rather than getting this pass as grieving parents and being beloved and boosted entirely your entire remaining life, you've been under scrutiny because you just look so fucking dodgy. So, I don't know, what do you think? Go and listen to it yourselves. At first it's just very annoying because there's waffle and lots of advertising, so lots of revenue. It makes sense now to me why there is a lot of advertising and a lot of revenue. I believe that the prosecutors is simply a cute name. I don't think it would express, I'm not necessarily sure. I don't know. I haven't actually really researched them. But I suspect that Brett and Alice aren't actively using their law degrees. If they are, probably rarely. So I think that their ambitions now are for something else. And people can be bought. If you've got, if you've got something about you that makes you an asset as a mouthpiece, and you have a certain ethical, moral standard, or just a need to make some money, you could be bought, essentially, and it could be packaged up to be something else. You could even lie greatly to yourself that you are doing marvelous works because you're an activist and you believe in truth and you just want to reveal truth and support victims. You're a victim's advocate. You don't have to be in the right. You just have to be misguided. I think we are learning this in the Morphew case, where people are being absolutely screwed. They have lost their capacity for objectivity because of feeling and passion. And what's happening there is the Attorney General, whose loyalty, so to speak, lies with the people that are being sued by Barry Morphew. His family is being sued, his colleagues, his work family, the people that he's paid to support, to administer leadership to, are being sued by some citizen who has been accused of first-degree murder. And this is going to be very, very expensive. They're going to, have to really dig deep into the legal fees themselves and into negotiations with the teams of people that liaise between them and the insurance companies that underwrite these policies that are there, just like in the medical profession. People in professions pay premiums. It's actually compulsory. You pay into these big funds, and it means that you are covered for when you are sued. And Barry Morphew is suing these people. And so as a little safeguard, as a dick move, as an absolute abuse of his power, the Attorney General, Phil Weiser, has put the name of a woman, Suzanne Morphew, who is missing, down as known to be deceased, and deceased through either direct domestic violence or in the context of domestic violence. She's in the list for victims of 2021. So I have been highlighting what these other victims on this list went through and how they died, and what do other victims, what did their lives look like, what did their case look like, what were the circumstances of their deaths. So I've highlighted a few and I'm going to keep going. A lot of it is terribly, terribly sad, and you see the gamut and the full range of horror that goes on. some of it insidious behind closed doors, where and some of it that is often played out for a long time prior in the public eye. People who are motivated by money, people who all sorts of players. It's very interesting. And sadly, there's an unknown woman listed on there. How an unknown woman is on, I mean, not only is that just terribly, terribly sad, I would also like it explained how she is there in the context of domestic violence if they don't even know who the fuck she is. Are they so broad with the definition that, oh, this is a missing person, if someone's run away or been, that's some sort of domestic abuse? I don't know. It's very bizarre, actually. That was too long a digression. I am very sorry. I did just want to talk about the Ramsey case, the prosecutors, and Ramsey's, it's like he's on the campaign trail, okay? He's on the campaign trail leading up to CrimeCon, which is coming up very soon in America, and he's doing it because he wants to go there as a victim. He wants to go there as a victim and because he's elderly as well, and he's possibly not very well, and he thinks that if he can have your understanding, your acceptance, that he might be able to die a free man. You might want to listen to something that I read out about the little star that's in my Ramsey playlist. I don't think anybody who is involved with JonBenet's murder got off scot-free on their deathbed, or will get off scot-free on their deathbed, not spiritually. So, if he's not going to be in control of the huge DMT rush that he's going to have, if John Bennett Ramsey has something to do with the murder of his own daughter, JonBenet, I hope it's a really bad trip.